Be true to your school. You know what that means. Wah. Oh, I already did that joke, didn't I? Shoot, I gotta think of something else now. Oh, Michael Love? Yes, when is the Beach Boys' 60th anniversary reunion tour going to start? When is the tour starting? When? When? Hello? Many years ago, when I first started collecting Beach Boys things, I saw a poster for the 1982 album Sunshine Dream. Sunshine Dream, of course, is the forgotten third installment of the Endless Summer trilogy. Two very successful hits packages, and then the one that wasn't a success that no one remembers today. But on that poster, below all this very colorful beach iconography, there was a sort of collect them all window with pictures of previous Beach Boys albums, other records from the late 70s, early 80s you could add to your collection. And I was looking at this poster, and I couldn't help but wonder why some of the albums seemed to have the wrong names. They were marketing albums like Fun 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 and Dance Dance Dance, and we all know there aren't Beach Boys studio albums with those names. Most of the other albums looked basically the same. We still saw things like Beach Boys Party and Beach Boys Concert, but there were just a few that had the wrong name attached. And then there was one picture that I didn't recognize at all, and as they were relatively small images, I thought, what could this album possibly be? Well, today, we're going to talk about what those albums were as we look at the Capitol reissues. Something we've talked about previously on this channel is the difficulty that the Beach Boys had dealing with Capitol Records. They formed their own brother label, there was a split, there were some various rights issues we talked about with albums like Spirit of America and Beach Boys Rarities. Somewhere along the line, as the Beach Boys were still a very bankable commodity and a popular group, Capitol decided to reissue many of their 1960s albums. But for the first several in their catalog, they didn't reissue them the normal way. Instead, they gave us abridged reissues. Now, we've talked about reissues before on this channel. We talked about the Pickwick ones from kind of the early mid 1970s. The Pickwick records kind of did their own thing. Some were abridged copies of other albums, others were sort of customized track lists. But Capitol took that idea and ran with it, and rebranded and re-released several classic Beach Boys albums from the early and mid-60s, so all their new fans could buy them. So, for example, this album was originally Summer Days and Summer Nights, back in 1965. This is a reissue from the late 1970s. Capitol retitled the album California Girls, and they removed two songs from the track list, which we'll talk about those removals later. See, we got some new artwork with different pictures, got a new little write-up on the back, all sorts of things like that. So, Fun 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 had one spin, shut down Volume 2, Dance 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 had one spin, The Beach Boys Today, and so on. Now, some of the albums kept their original names and kept some of the original design elements. Here's the reissue from the early 80s of Little Deuce Coupe with two songs removed. Again, we'll come back to what was removed and what was reused a little bit later in the video. But for the most part, it looks exactly the same as an original Little Deuce Coupe. You'd actually have to sit there and be looking very carefully at the record label to make sure you got the correct thing, you got what you wanted there. And we had some very unusual choices too. Albums like Best of the Beach Boys Volume 2. I believe this was the last time this album was ever released anywhere, but they took off the Christmas song and the live country song. The reason that case is empty, I like to display my tape. Bruce signed one side, and Mike Love signed the other for me. Speaking of signed cassettes, Surfer Girl was reissued, keeping the same artwork, but again omitting two songs. And, oops, wrong thing. David Marks didn't sign the cassette tape, but when I interviewed David Marks, he signed inside the cassette case there, as you can see. But not every album was abridged either. And the two I showed you earlier, Party, Though Party, they did change the cover image. They replaced the, this includes Beach Boys Fun fan photos. That was changed, just another photo. But the album is the same. Here's a reissue of Concert, and that was also not abridged. I will say both the records and these cassette tapes, they are very honest. It does say a capital reissue. You can see it maybe at the very bottom of that. So you know you're not getting an original one. And those that abridge, I know at least some of them have a disclaimer. This one says formerly entitled Shutdown Volume 2. It does not say that songs are removed. But I know there's at least one, I think it's the Little Deuce Coupe one, that does say, hey, this has, songs removed from the original track list there, original running order. So, the Beach Boys catalog being reissued, late 70s, early mid-80s, with songs cut off, no doubt to save on royalty payments to the Beach Boys. And that brings us to today's record, this one oddball that as a teenager getting into the group I didn't recognize. Indeed, we rarely see that photo. That's a great photo of Al. I think it's my favorite picture of him. Good picture in the back. This is a little record called Be True to Your School. There has to be some place for all those unused songs to go, or at least most of them to go. And so why not have a new Beach Boys album that uses those tracks that were cut from the other releases. But that's not all Be True to Your School is. Indeed, I would argue the most important thing about it is it was the first LP to feature the single version of Be True to Your School. As far as I can tell, Be True to Your School, the single mix, had only been released on 45 up till 1982 when this record came out. The easy way to tell them apart, of course, is the single version, has the honeys as the cheerleaders, push them back, way back, and all that kind of stuff in it. The album version doesn't. The album version had been used on all the previous sort of releases there. Endless Summer used the album version back in 1974. That Pickwick compilation, which I double-checked to make sure, also uses the album version. So the single, if you didn't collect 45s, you wouldn't have this in your collection. So I think someone at Capitol said, hey, why don't we use this as kind of the lead-off track? Beach Boys fans will buy it if it has a song that they probably can't really get anywhere else. And I'm sure that worked for quite a few Beach Boys fans. So the very first time that we see Be True to Your School single mix on an LP. Now today, of course, most sets, most compilations, most collections, there it is, will use the single version, but interestingly, as far as I know, that single is only available in mono. As far as I know, it's never been remixed to stereo officially. There are fan remixes. As far as I know, it's not even been redone for duophonic or like with digitally extracted stereo or anything like that. It's weird. It's the only mono track on the whole Sounds of Summer reissue set, which is kind of strange. It's not really noticeable, but I think if you were making like an audio project or something like that, I could see that being kind of frustrating, that you would want to have a stereo version. And even releases like, here's my favorite Beach Boys hits package, or one of my favorites anyway, 20 Good Vibrations Volume 1, that uses the mono single mix. So this was kind of blazing a trail in terms of using the single in place of the album version, and this record is indeed in mono. Next up on the list we have In the Back of My Mind. So when Beach Boys Today was renamed and reissued as Dance, 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 I'll open it up for you, they cut 2 songs off the track list for today. They took off the closing track, Bull Session with Big Daddy, no loss there, and they took off the closing song, the last musical track on the album, In the Back of My Mind, which Dennis sings. In the Back of My Mind, it's a beautiful song. Brian Wilson would redo it again in the 70s. That version would be released in 2015, and he does an even better job than Dennis does, I think. But In the Back of My Mind is really the only deep cut on here. It feels kind of out of place, but it's nice to have like a Dennis moment, so I think it kind of works, even though it's something of an oddball. Beautiful song. Not sure why they cut it, but I guess they figured that since they were taking the last track off, maybe they weren't sure, so they just took that one off too. But I like that it's here, and that's a really good song, and people who like the more emotional cuts, they could have something to gravitate towards on this album, I think. Followed by removal from Shutdown Volume 2's reissue, also known as Fun Fun Fun, we have In the Parking Lot. Not a whole lot to say there. We're always first to hit the lot and wave to the men in blue now. Fun song, goes good with a lot of their early 60s stuff. Showing up to school early, making out in your car till the bell rings and you don't want some adult to come out and yell at you, so you go inside. But that was originally on Shutdown Volume 2. That was reissued as Fun Fun Fun, and that was one of the removed songs that they used for this record. They did not use the other removed track, the spoken word Cassius Love versus Sonny Wilson, which, again, as it's spoken word comedy, I'm sure nobody was really missing that one too much, though that is the best of their spoken word tracks. Next up we have Surf Jam. So Surfin' USA, the group's second LP from 1963, I should say their second LP overall, the first one they released in '63. It has several instrumentals on it, and so they took off two of these because, as Al Jardine once put it, the Beach Boys are a vocal group, not an instrumental one. So they took off two songs, one of them being Surf Jam, which is exactly what it sounds. It sounds like it's a surf jam. Interestingly, this one is credited on the back solely to Carl Wilson. Everything on this record here is credited to Brian and Roger Christian, Brian and Carl, or Carl solo. Surf Jam, it's the latter case there, or the lattermost case there, I should say. With that, nice to have a couple instrumentals on here. They don't go too crazy with them. I can see why they were cut too. Again, we don't think of any Beach Boys instrumentals as being kind of seminal tracks in their catalog. Maybe something like Pet Sounds would occasionally pop up, but for the most part we want to hear their voices. And then rounding out side one there, we have Car Crazy Cutie. We talked about Pamela Jean in my Beach Boys Rarities video. By the way, Brad Elliott, the man in charge of Beach Boys Rarities, worked on this record as well. He is credited, you probably can't see it, but credited as special assistant. Car Crazy Cutie was taken from Little Deuce Coupe. Here's an original Little Deuce Coupe. And then remember, this was one that kept its original name, kept the original artwork, and so on for the reissue. Not sure why they picked Car Crazy Cutie, but maybe they thought it just wasn't as, complex, or maybe it wasn't as masculine as some of those other car songs were. So they put it here instead. And it's a nice closer, I think. Got some good doo-wop vocals on there. Flip the record over. By the way, it is a capital value. I'll show you the record sleeve here in a little bit. We start off with Amusement Parks USA. So Summer Days and Summer Nights was reissued as California Girls. I'll show you the back there. They took off two things. We'll get to the second thing later, but the first one they took off was Amusement Parks USA. I know that song grates on some people with all the weird laughter and stuff. I think it's worth it, mostly just to hear Hal Blaine's carnival barker routine. Hurry, hurry, step right up for the Beach Boys Circus, the bestest show in town. Only a dime, folks. One thin dime, just 1/10 of a dollar. So that makes it worth listening to, and I think it's actually good as a lead-off for this side. Amusement Parks USA was the B-side to the very rare Salt Lake City single, but not many people would have had that, so technically an album cut, and not a bad addition to this one. And we have an instrumental, Carl's Big Chance. I actually don't have a reissue copy of All Summer Long, so I'll show you my original All Summer Long. They took off the spoken word track, again, our favorite recording sessions, and they also took off the surf instrumental, Carl's Big Chance. Really not a lot to say. Again, we have 3 instrumentals on here, which isn't terrible. Had there been one more, I think it would have been a little overwhelming. But if you want just like a nice break with some surf rock, some guitar, that'd be an okay choice. And we have another Little Deuce Coupe outtake. Check my custom machine. You step on the gas, you go. So, yeah, Custom Machine, that's a really fun one, and one I think they should have kept on Little Deuce Coupe album, but maybe they thought it was too obnoxious or something. But I do like it here, and again, fits in pretty good with the theme of mostly early music from the group. And we have our last instrumental, also a Surfin' USA outtake, or removal in this case, with Stoked, which has kind of the Miserlou vibe going on there. Interestingly, they kept most of the covers on these albums. They didn't really take the covers off, so they must not have minded paying royalties to the original artists there, just didn't want to pay them to the Beach Boys. And lastly, the other outtake from Summer Days and Summer Nights, aka California Girls. I'm bugged at my old man, and he doesn't even know where it's at. So I'm bugged at my old man wraps us up there. Kind of, you know, going with a novelty song as a closer, a little bit different. I like it though. I like that. I always thought that was a fun song. And the best thing about it is on the original album, Brian is credited as too embarrassed for the lead vocal credit, which is kind of funny. So I got this record, I cleaned it up a little bit. And we have the Capital Green. I've been told the green labels are the best. Most of the other ones I have for these reissues are orange, but this one is indeed green. A lot of them had multiple releases too, and there are Beach Boys fans who say that the quality of the record you got depends solely on what color the label is and where it was pressed. And I could see that being true. These were marketed very heavily as budget albums, that kind of thing. You might find in the bargain bin. There we go. But overall, pretty fun purchase. Interesting tracks. And the first time a very popular single made its way to LP. So what do you think of the Beach Boys and their reissue campaigns? If you have any thoughts on the Pickwick reissues, these Capitol reissues, or any other re-releases or remixes or reduxes or whatever that you can think of, please do comment below. And since it's around graduation time and end of the school year time, to all of my current and former students watching, it's been a pleasure to have been your teacher. Indeed, not just a pleasure, but a privilege as well. And I hope you go far in life. And always remember to be true to your school.